The smell of burnt coffee filled my workshop as I stared at the text message that would change everything. Can't make it to your birthday dinner tonight? Something came up with work. Sorry, Eli. 43 years old today, and my wife Caroline couldn't even pretend to care anymore. I set down my phone next to the carburetor I'd been rebuilding and wiped my greasy hands on my coveralls. Elliot Brooks, master of fixing broken engines, but apparently clueless about fixing a broken marriage. Everything all right, boss? Lenny poked his head around the corner of my auto repair shop, his 20-something face creased with concern. The kid had been working for me for 3 years now, ever since he dropped out of college to help support his sick mom. Just peachy, I muttered, my voice dripping with the sarcasm that had become my default setting. My loving wife just canceled on my birthday dinner. Again. This made the third time in 2 months. Caroline had bailed on plans we'd made. First, it was her sister's emergency that turned out to be help picking out curtains. Then, it was a work crisis that somehow involved her getting home at 2 in the morning, smelling like expensive cologne I definitely couldn't afford on a mechanic's salary. I'd made reservations at Lakeside Grill, the fancy restaurant overlooking Chester Lake that charged $30 for a piece of fish smaller than the wrench in my back pocket. Caroline loved that place, always posting pictures of their overpriced appetizers on her Instagram with captions like living my best life. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was apparently not part of her best life. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Maggie, the bartender at Murphy's Tavern downtown. Saw your wife at Lakeside with some guy in a suit. Thought you should know. My stomach dropped like a transmission falling off a lift. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the words fully sank in. Caroline was at our restaurant, our reservation with another man. Son of a bitch, I whispered. What's that? Lenny called out. Nothing. Just talking to myself. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. Lock up when you're done with the Camaro. I've got somewhere I need to be. The drive to Lakeside took 12 minutes, but it felt like an hour. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my beat-up Ford pickup so tight my knuckles went white. Part of me hoped Maggie was wrong, that she'd mistaken some other blonde woman for my wife. But deep down, I knew better. Caroline had been distant for months. No more casual touches when she walked by. No more laughing at my admittedly terrible jokes. She'd started working late more often, always with some excuse about her job at the marketing firm downtown. She managed social media accounts for local businesses, which apparently required a lot of evening client meetings. I should have seen it coming. The parking lot at Lakeside was packed with luxury cars and SUVs that cost more than I made in 2 years. My truck looked like a rusty turd among all the shiny metal. I found a spot in the back corner and sat there for a moment, trying to decide what to do next. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see couples dining by candlelight. The place was all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the kind of industrial chic that made hipsters weak in the knees. I scanned the tables until I found her. There she was, my wife of 8 years, sitting across from a man I recognized but couldn't immediately place. He was wearing an expensive-looking navy suit and had the kind of perfectly styled hair that screamed, "I spend more on product than most people spend on groceries." They were leaning toward each other, her hand covering his on the white tablecloth. It was Derek Foster. I remembered him now from Caroline's company Christmas party 2 years ago. Real estate agent, drove a BMW, had the kind of smile that belonged on a toothpaste commercial. Caroline had introduced him as just a friend from work, but I'd caught them talking in hushed tones by the punch bowl while I was getting lectured by her boss about quarterly projections. I sat in my truck watching them for 20 minutes. They ordered wine, expensive wine, judging by how long the sommelier spent describing it. Derek reached across the table and tucked a strand of Caroline's blonde hair behind her ear. She giggled like a teenager. My phone rang, making me jump. Caroline's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, honey," she said when I answered, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I'm so sorry about tonight. This work thing is running really late. Rain check on dinner?" I could hear restaurant noise in the background. The clink of silverware, muted conversations, someone laughing. "Sure," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Work comes first, right? You're the best. I love you. The line went dead. Through the window, I watched her slip her phone back into her purse and smile at Derek like he'd just told her she'd won the lottery. I started my truck and drove home in a daze. Our house was a modest two-story colonial in one of Chester's older neighborhoods. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, or so I'd thought. Inside, everything looked exactly the same, but felt completely different. The family photos on the mantel seemed like evidence of a life that had never really existed. Caroline smiling at our wedding. Carolyn on our honeymoon in Maine. Caroline at last year's 4th of July barbecue. Her arm around my waist. All lies, all performance. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table where Carolyn paid our bills every month. Her laptop was still open, the screensaver bouncing around like a digital pinball. She'd left in such a hurry to meet Derek that she'd forgotten to close it. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as I moved the mouse to wake up the screen. But 43 years of being the good guy, the understanding husband, the man who fixed everyone else's problems while ignoring his own, had left me with exactly nothing to show for it except a cheating wife and a birthday dinner for one. Her email was open. The first message in her inbox was from Derek, sent 3 hours ago. The subject line read, "Can't wait for tonight." I clicked on it. "Caroline, I've been thinking about you all day. Tonight feels like the start of something amazing. I know it's complicated with Eli, but we can figure it out. You deserve so much more than what you have. See you at 7. D." My hands were shaking as I scrolled down to see Caroline's reply. "I feel the same way." I told him I had to work late. He bought it completely. God, I can't wait to be done with all this pretending. Tonight is about us. C. There were dozens of other emails. Weeks of correspondence that painted a picture of a full-blown affair, complete with hotel receipts and plans for weekend getaways. Caroline hadn't just cheated on me. She'd built an entire secret relationship while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for the life she was living with another man. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was how stupid they thought I was. How easy it had been to fool the simple mechanic who spent his days with his hands in engine grease, instead of paying attention to his own life. I closed the laptop and finished my beer. Then I opened another one. Tomorrow was going to be a very different day. I woke up on the couch at 5:30 in the morning with a crick in my neck and the taste of stale beer in my mouth. Caroline's car wasn't in the driveway. She'd never come home. The smart thing would have been to call a divorce lawyer. File papers, split assets, move on with my life like a mature adult. But as I stood in my empty kitchen making coffee with hands that still smelled like motor oil, I realized I didn't want to be smart. I wanted to be thorough. Caroline thought I was stupid. Derek thought I was irrelevant. They'd spent months planning their future while treating me like a convenient placeholder. Well, it was time to show them exactly how observant this dumb mechanic could be. I called Lenny and told him to open the shop without me. "Family emergency," I said, which wasn't technically a lie. Then I drove to Murphy's Tavern to find Maggie. Murphy's was the kind of dive bar that opened at 7 in the morning for the third shift workers and functioning alcoholics who needed a drink before most people had their first cup of coffee. Maggie was behind the bar wiping down glasses, her gray hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said when I walked through the door. "You look like hell, Eli." "Feel worse than I look." I sat down on a cracked vinyl bar stool. "Tell me about last night." Maggie poured me a cup of coffee without being asked. She'd been bartending at Murphy's for 20 years and had developed an almost supernatural ability to read people's moods. "Your wife and that real estate guy were all over each other. Holding hands, sharing dessert, the whole 9 yards. I'm sorry, honey. I really am." "How long have you known?" "About 2 months. They've been meeting there every couple weeks, always on nights when you're working late at the shop." She leaned against the bar, her expression sympathetic but not pitying. Maggie had been through her own share of cheating husbands. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes," I said. "And then I'm going to make sure everyone in town knows what kind of people they really are." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like trouble." "Good. I'm in the mood for trouble." I spent the rest of the morning doing research. Derek Foster worked for Prestige Properties, one of the bigger real estate agencies in town. His bio on their website described him as Chester's premier luxury home specialist and included a photo of him standing in front of a mansion with his arms crossed and a smile that made me want to punch something. His social media profiles were a masterclass in narcissism. Endless photos of expensive cars, exotic vacations, and restaurant meals that cost more than most people's car payments. There were also several pictures of him at various Chester social events, always impeccably dressed and usually surrounded by attractive women. Caroline appeared in exactly 0 of his public photos. I cross-referenced the dates of Derek's social media posts with Caroline's work schedule. Every time she'd claimed to be working late or attending a client meeting, Derek had posted photos from the same restaurants or events. They'd been hiding in plain sight, confident that her dumb husband would never connect the dots. My phone rang around noon. Caroline's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, where are you?" she asked when I answered. "I stopped by the shop and Lenny said you weren't coming in today." "Family emergency," I repeated. "Where did you end up sleeping last night? You never came home." There was a pause. "I ended up crashing at Miranda's place. The work thing ran so late and I'd had a few glasses of wine, so I didn't want to drive." Miranda was Caroline's best friend from college, a real estate agent who specialized in helping rich people buy vacation homes. She was also married to Derek's business partner. "That was smart," I said. "Safety first." "Exactly. Listen, I'm really sorry about missing your birthday. Let me make it up to you this weekend. We could drive up to Portland, maybe stay at that bed and breakfast you like." The casual way she lied was almost impressive. No hesitation, no guilt in her voice. Just smooth deception, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd had plenty of practice. "Sounds great," I said. "I love you too, Caroline." "I love you too." Another lie, delivered with the same practiced ease. After we hung up, I drove to Prestige Properties. Derek's BMW was parked in the reserved spot closest to the building, still gleaming from what was probably a weekly detailing. I parked across the street and waited. At 2:15, Derek emerged from the building with another man in an expensive suit. They stood next to the BMW, talking and laughing about something. Derek kept checking his phone and grinning like a teenager with his first crush. They shook hands and Derek got in his car. I followed him at a distance as he drove through downtown Chester, past the boutique shops and overpriced cafes that catered to the summer tourist crowd. He pulled into the parking lot of the Marriott, one of the nicer hotels in town. I watched from my truck as Derek walked into the lobby, carrying a small overnight bag. 20 minutes later, Caroline's white Lexus pulled into the same parking lot. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, and had clearly spent extra time on her hair and makeup. They were meeting for an afternoon tryst while I was supposed to be working at the shop, oblivious to what was happening 15 minutes away from my own business. I took photos with my phone. Derek entering the hotel, Caroline arriving, the license plates of both cars, timestamps for everything. Then I drove home and started making a plan. Caroline came home at 6 o'clock, claiming she'd spent the afternoon showing houses to a client from Boston. She kissed me on the cheek and asked about my day like nothing had happened. We ordered Chinese food and watched Netflix on the couch, her head on my shoulder like we were still the happy couple from our wedding photos. "I'm really sorry about last night," she said during a commercial break. "I know how much that dinner meant to you." "It's okay," I said, stroking her hair. "I understand how important your work is." She squeezed my hand. "You're the best husband in the world, Eli. I don't deserve you." For the first time in months, Caroline was telling the absolute truth. The next morning, Caroline left for work at her usual time, kissing me goodbye and reminding me to pick up milk on the way home. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then called my buddy Rick, who worked at the phone company. "I need a favor," I told him, "and it's probably not entirely legal." "Jesus, Eli, what kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind where my wife is cheating on me and I need to know how bad it is." Rick was quiet for a moment. He'd been through his own messy divorce 3 years earlier. "What do you need?" "Phone records, text messages if you can get them. I'll pay whatever it costs. I can't get you the actual messages, but I can tell you who she's been texting and when." "Give me her number." 2 hours later, Rick called me back with information that made my stomach turn. Caroline had been exchanging dozens of text messages every day with Derek's number. But that wasn't the worst part. She'd also been in regular contact with Miranda, Derek's business partner's wife, and three other numbers I didn't recognize. Looks like your wife has been pretty busy, Rick said. Want me to run the other numbers? Do it. The other numbers belonged to two more real estate agents and a woman named Jessica, who worked at a marketing firm in Portland. I didn't know what the connection was, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I drove to Murphy's Tavern and found Maggie setting up for the lunch crowd. Back again? She asked. This is becoming a habit. I need information, I said. What do you know about Miranda Peterson? Maggie's expression darkened. Derek's friend? She's bad news, honey. Comes in here sometimes with a group of real estate people. They sit in the corner booth and talk trash about their clients, their spouses, everyone. Real nasty stuff. What kind of nasty stuff? Last month, I heard her telling someone about how she was helping a friend transition out of an inconvenient marriage. Said they had it all figured out, just needed to be patient and wait for the right moment. My blood ran cold. Did she mention any names? Not that I heard, but she was sitting with your wife and that Derek character. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. Caroline, Derek, and Miranda had been planning my humiliation, probably figuring out how to maximize Caroline's settlement in a divorce while minimizing any damage to Derek's reputation. I thanked Maggie and drove to Lenny's apartment. The kid lived in a converted garage behind his mom's house, surrounded by car parts and computer equipment. He was one of those guys who could fix anything with an engine or a circuit board. Boss? Lenny looked surprised to see me at his door. What's going on? I need your help with something, I said, and it might get us both in trouble. Lenny grinned. I'm listening. I explained the situation without going into too much detail. Lenny's face got more serious as I talked. That's messed up, man. What do you want me to do? I need surveillance equipment. Nothing illegal. Just stuff to keep track of what's happening in public places. I can do that. Give me a day or two to put something together. That afternoon, I followed Derek again. This time he met Carolyn at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that charged $6 for a latte and played jazz music that made you feel sophisticated for drinking overpriced bean water. They sat at a corner table, heads close together, talking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear what they were saying from my position across the street, but their body language told the story. Caroline kept touching Derek's arm. He kept looking around nervously like he was worried about being seen. After an hour, they left separately. Carolyn went back to her office. Derek drove to a house showing in one of Chester's more expensive neighborhoods. I was starting to understand their pattern. Public meetings disguised as coincidental encounters, separate arrivals and departures, hotel meetings when they wanted privacy. They'd thought through every detail, except the possibility that someone might be paying attention. That evening, Caroline came home with takeout from my favorite barbecue place. Thought we could have a nice dinner together, she said, setting the bags on the kitchen table. I feel like we haven't been spending enough time together lately. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. That's really thoughtful, I said. How was your day? Busy. Had 3 client meetings and a conference call with that Portland firm I've been trying to land. She opened containers of pulled pork and coleslaw. What about you? How's the Henderson car coming along? We made small talk over dinner like a normal married couple. Caroline asked about my work, told me about her day, laughed at my jokes. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought we were happy. I've been thinking, she said as we cleaned up the dishes. Maybe we should take that vacation we've been talking about. Get away from Chester for a while, just the two of us. Where were you thinking? I don't know. Somewhere warm, maybe the Caribbean? I wondered if Derek had suggested the same destination. Sounds expensive. We can afford it. I've been saving money for my freelance work. More lies. According to the bank statements I checked that morning, Caroline had been spending more money than usual, not saving it. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, shopping trips that didn't result in anything new appearing in our closet. Let me think about it, I said. That night, Caroline fell asleep with her head on my chest, her breathing slow and steady. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about the woman lying next to me. 8 years of marriage. And I was sharing a bed with a complete stranger. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lenny. Got your equipment ready. This is going to be interesting. I smiled in the darkness. Carolyn and Derek thought they were so clever, so careful. They had no idea what was coming. Lenny's surveillance equipment was more sophisticated than I'd expected. Tiny cameras that could be hidden anywhere, audio recording devices no bigger than a thumb drive, and a GPS tracker that could be attached to a car in seconds. This is some serious spy stuff, I said, examining the gear in Lenny's garage workshop. I've been watching a lot of YouTube tutorials, he said proudly. The GPS tracker is completely legal as long as you own the vehicle or have permission to track it. The cameras are fine for public spaces. The audio stuff gets tricky depending on consent laws. But if you're recording people in public, you're usually okay. I attached the GPS tracker to the underside of Caroline's car while she was at work. The cameras went in strategic locations around town: the coffee shop where she met Derek, the hotel parking lot, the restaurant where they had their romantic dinners, while I sat at home eating frozen pizza. Within a week, I had a complete picture of their relationship. They met 3 times a week, always at different locations. They'd been together for at least 4 months, maybe longer. And they weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. The audio I captured at the coffee shop was particularly illuminating. I can't keep lying to him, Carolyn said during one of their meetings. He's starting to ask questions. Just a little longer, Derek replied. Miranda says we need to be patient. If we do this right, you'll get half of everything, and he won't be able to prove adultery. What if he finds out? He won't. Look at him, Caroline. The guy spends 14 hours a day with his head under a car hood. He's not exactly Sherlock Holmes. They both laughed at that. The sound of my wife mocking me with her lover was like being stabbed in the chest with a rusty screwdriver. But Derek was wrong about one thing. I might not be Sherlock Holmes, but I was very good at solving problems. And Caroline and Derek had just become my biggest problem. I decided it was time to let them know I wasn't as stupid as they thought. On a Thursday evening, I told Caroline I had to work late on an emergency repair job. Instead, I drove to the Marriott and waited in the parking lot. Right on schedule, Derek's BMW pulled up at 7:30. Caroline arrived 10 minutes later. I gave them an hour to get settled, then walked into the hotel lobby and asked to use the house phone. Derek Foster's room, please, I told the desk clerk. The phone rang 3 times before Derek answered, slightly out of breath. Derek, this is Eli Brooks, Caroline's husband. Dead silence. I know you're there, Derek, and I know my wife is there with you. I don't know what you're talking about, Derek stammered. Room 247. You checked in 2 hours ago under the name Foster. Caroline arrived at 7:40 p.m. driving her white Lexus, license plate 394 HBK. She's wearing the blue dress she told me she was saving for our anniversary. More silence. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to get dressed, check out of that room, and never contact my wife again. If you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in Chester knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your boss, your clients, your mother, everyone. You can't prove anything, Derek said, but his voice was shaking. Want to bet? I've got photos, videos, audio recordings, phone records, credit card statements, and a GPS tracker on Caroline's car that shows everywhere you two have been together. I know about the coffee shop meetings, the hotel visits, and that romantic dinner you had at Lakeside on my birthday. The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. What do you want? Derek finally asked. I want you to disappear. Tonight, pack your bags, quit your job, and get out of Chester. If I see you anywhere near my wife again, I'll destroy your life. You're crazy. No, Derek, I'm thorough. There's a difference. I hung up and walked back to my truck. 20 minutes later, Derek emerged from the hotel looking like he'd seen a ghost. Caroline followed a few minutes later, her face red and blotchy from crying. I followed her home at a distance. She was driving erratically, probably crying and trying to call Derek at the same time. She pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for 10 minutes before coming inside. I was waiting in the kitchen when she walked through the door. How was work? I asked casually. Caroline stared at me like I was a stranger. Her makeup was smeared and her hands were shaking. It was fine. Good. I picked up some ice cream on the way home. Thought we could watch a movie. She nodded slowly, still staring at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. Eli, we need to talk. About what? About, about us? About our marriage. I smiled at her. The same smile I'd given her every day for 8 years. What about it? I love you, Caroline. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The look on her face was almost worth everything she'd put me through. I'm going to take a shower, she said quietly. Good idea. You look like you've had a rough day. After she went upstairs, I sat in my kitchen eating ice cream and planning my next move. Derek might be gone, but this wasn't over. Caroline had betrayed me, humiliated me, and plotted behind my back for months. She thought she could manipulate me, lie to me, and treat me like an idiot. It was time to show her exactly how wrong she was. Derek left town the next day. I knew because I'd been monitoring his social media accounts, and suddenly all his posts stopped. His real estate listings disappeared from the Prestige Properties website. His BMW was no longer parked in its reserved spot. Caroline was a mess. She kept checking her phone, jumping every time it rang, and staring at me like she was trying to figure out how much I knew. The confident, manipulative woman who'd been lying to my face for months had been replaced by someone who looked like she was afraid of her own shadow. Are you feeling okay? I asked her over breakfast on Saturday morning. You seem stressed. I'm fine, she said quickly. Just tired. Work has been really demanding lately. Maybe you should take some time off. You've been working so many late nights. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe, I'll think about it. That afternoon, while Caroline was supposedly running errands, I drove to Miranda Peterson's house. She lived in one of Chester's newer developments, the kind of place where every house looked identical except for the color of the shutters. Miranda answered the door wearing yoga pants and a suspicious expression. Eli, what are you doing here? I wanted to talk to you about Caroline, I said. Can I come in? She's not here. I know. I want to talk to you. Miranda hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. Her house was decorated like a furniture store showroom, all neutral colors and strategic accent pieces. It looked expensive and completely soulless. What's this about? She asked, not offering me a seat. It's about the advice you've been giving my wife, about her inconvenient marriage and how to handle her transition. Miranda's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You've been helping Caroline plan her exit strategy, telling her how to maximize her settlement, when to file for divorce, how to make sure Derek's reputation doesn't get damaged in the process. That's ridiculous. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I'd captured at Murphy's Tavern. Maggie's voice was clear as she repeated Miranda's words about helping a friend transition out of an inconvenient marriage. Miranda sank into one of her perfectly arranged chairs. Where did you get that? I get around. Here's what's going to happen, Miranda. You're going to call Carolyn and tell her that you can't help her anymore. You're going to recommend that she try to work things out with her husband, instead of running off with married real estate agents. And if I don't, then I'll make sure your husband knows about your role in this whole mess. I'll also make sure the real estate commission knows that you and Derek were using inside information to help clients commit adultery. That's got to violate some kind of professional ethics code. Miranda stared at me for a long moment. You're not the man Caroline described. No, I'm not. Caroline described the man she wanted me to be. Stupid, oblivious, easy to manipulate. But that's not who I am. That's just who I was pretending to be, because I loved her. And now I'm done pretending. I left Miranda's house and drove home. Caroline was in the kitchen making dinner, moving around like she was walking on broken glass. How were your errands? I asked. Fine, just picked up some things at the store. She was lying again. I'd been tracking her car, and she'd spent 2 hours parked outside Derek's apartment building. He was already gone, but she didn't know that yet. We ate dinner in uncomfortable silence. Caroline kept glancing at her phone, waiting for a message that would never come. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. Eli, I need to tell you something. What's that? I've been unhappy in our marriage. I think we need to talk about making some changes. I set down my fork and looked at her. Really looked at her. 8 years of marriage, and I was seeing her clearly for the first time. What kind of changes? Maybe we should try counseling, or maybe... She took a shaky breath. Maybe we should consider a separation. A separation? Just temporary. To figure things out. I could stay with Miranda for a while, give us both some space to think. It was exactly what I'd expected. Phase 1 of the plan she'd developed with Derek and Miranda. Separate. File for divorce. Claim irreconcilable differences. Clean and simple, with no messy adultery allegations to complicate the settlement. That's a big decision, I said. Are you sure that's what you want? I think it might be best for both of us. I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. Okay, if that's what you think we need to do. Caroline looked surprised. She'd probably expected me to fight, to beg, to make a scene. Instead, I was being reasonable and accommodating, just like always. Really? You're okay with it? I want you to be happy, Caroline. If you think a separation will help, then we should try it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you for understanding. You're a good man, Eli. I try to be. That night, Caroline packed a suitcase while I watched TV in the living room. She was moving carefully, quietly, like she was afraid of setting off some kind of trap. When she came downstairs with her bags, she looked like she was about to cry. I'll call you in a few days, she said. We can talk about next steps. Take your time. I'll be here. She kissed me on the cheek and walked out the door. I watched through the window as she loaded her suitcase into the Lexus and drove away. Then I opened my laptop and started phase 2 of my own plan.